Hello, everyone. Welcome back to our discussion group for The Warrior Prophet, which is the second book of the Prince of Nothing trilogy by R. Scott Baker. We have been reading this series a little bit at a time and discussing it every week. Currently, we are working our way through The Warrior Prophet, 100 pages per week. And today is the final discussion for this book. We're going to discuss the last 100 pages and also everything else that happened in this book, and talk about which of our theories came true and which ones are yet to be tested. The answer to the first question is none yet. But Steve, would you like to start us off with introductions?
Sure. My name's Steve, and I love the series, and it's my second time reading this book, and I am enjoying reading with all of you. And now that I'm on the other side, knowing what happens, it's nice to hear first-time reactions and how close your predictions are or aren't. So glad to be here.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Mike?
Yes, I'm Mike. I'm a first timer reading the series, and yeah, it was quite a finale to this. Can't wait to talk about it.
And I am Carl, also a first timer. And yeah, I love the Warrior Prophet. I mean, I guess jumping into things a little bit, I thought this had the ending, like the sort of climax I really wanted in the first book. I remember being just a little bit, like I was satisfied with it overall, but just being a little disappointed. I was expecting a little more at the end of the darkness that comes before, and this really gave it. It was a lot.
Mm-hmm. And when you say ending, which do you mean the whole section or like how much of it do you mean? Like, I'm thinking of the last line, which makes something really important, but like what did you have in mind specifically for ending?
I mean, it's just the whole section we read, really. Like if you talk about sort of a book having, a climax in its like kind of final section, I felt that this was a particularly climactic way to end the stories we've been following over the course of this book. While we still have plenty of story to go, it definitely felt like there were pretty clear arcs in this book, and I felt like they paid off in really interesting ways. In some ways I didn't expect, some ways I did, but all I found very dramatic. And then, of course, we got our little last, I think it's an epilogue, right? That was totally unexpected. I did not expect to get all of the info we got there. And that was a delight and had me looking for fan art and trying to avoid spoilers at the same time. And I did. And now I know what something I was struggling to picture looked like, what it looks like. And so we'll get there, I'm sure.
Okay. Yeah, I think the last bit had several things that we wanted to discuss. So I almost want to start from the end, but we'll go in order. Um, was there anything from the so what happens in this book? I guess Kellis gets Valsarva dies and Kellis gets hanged ish. Akamian comes back home to Esmenet, finds out that he's being um well that Kellis has taken Esmenet pretty much. And then I guess the fallout from that. And then Nair has a bunch to do in these chapters as well.
Yeah, really. I mean, everyone. In a lot of what he is doing is talking now after his big explosive moment in the last section. But I think it's very important talking, and certainly Kellis is, in many ways, kind of his seeds, that he's been watering have blossomed, and for good or ill, we kind of see the fallout.
Yeah. What did you think of Akamian in this section? I liked I think we talked about this last week how he changed and stopped caring about the things that used to bother him a lot before, and I love to see that continued. But I was dreading his interactions with Esmenet, and boy was I right to dread them. uh, yeah, I kind of hate how he thinks about her. I had some sympathy for him before in regard to that relationship, but now I'm starting to feel like he doesn't deserve her at all. So Anyway, what did you guys think of that?
Hi there. I feel like I've already talked, so Mike, you want to jump in?
About the relationship, I don't know if I read it the same. I mean, I think it's a fucked up relationship. We all know that. I can't help but, I mean, I do feel bad for him in a way. The one thing that I will comment on is, why did it take him so long to get to them? Like, didn't he take a boat to get to them? Anyway, it seemed like it took a long time. So I kept waiting for that to happen, and I'm sure that, but it was well timed because already so much had happened. But I just think, she what I don't like about where she is now is that she's enamored with Kellis and is now going to take the place of Serway in a way, or she already had, and she's now, I think she's become his vessel. That I noticed that word several times, and that makes me uncomfortable.
Yeah.
but we don't know what exactly that means. But we do know that she's with child, supposedly his child. But how do we really know that? She changed her contraception so that when she was with him. So then that's how we know. Yeah. So I'm a little bit on the fence about the way he reacted to her was not so good, and I think but I mean, just don't know what else to say about that.
I also have mixed feelings about it. I mean, like, I think certainly his thoughts, his thoughts were very, they reeked with misogyny, certainly, and like the judgments that he's already cast against her is like, a harlot and a whore and all these, the names she's called. But at the same time, he feels betrayed, right? Like, he has been hurt by her. But you also, I don't really blame her because she's been manipulated. And as far as she knew, he was dead. And, I more than anything, I think I feel bad for Esmenet. And honestly, I feel bad for Akamian too. Maybe a little less than I feel bad for Esmenet. But he still, thought that, he thought of her as his wife. And so I think, he still is suffering. It's like having your best friend basically you come back home and your best friend has shacked up with your wife. Like, I think some of his thoughts, while they certainly they rhyme, you could say, with other judgmental thoughts he's had, I think a lot of it is just driven by his emotion and his pain in the moment. I don't know. I have mixed feelings. Like, I'm not happy with, his reaction necessarily. Partially, in fact, I'm not happy because he decides saving Kellis is ultimately the right thing to do to stop the apocalypse, which maybe it is. That's the tough moral quandary here, right? And I think it's very compelling, but I don't like it because I don't like Kellis, and I found it all just captivating. I was swept off by all of that drama. I found, Akamian reacted pretty much like I expected he would react, to be honest. I think the only thing that I was surprised by was he didn't turn his reaction into more self-loathing, or not explicitly so. I was expecting him a lot more to be like, well, of course, she thought I was dead, like at least Kellis was here for, like, almost like treating himself like he deserves, to be cuckolded or something. If you can even call what happened there, cuckolding. I think, there's a lot of definitely murky boundaries with all of their relationships. None of them are like very rigid, like we kind of traditionally imagined marriages are, right? Because none of them have been legally married or made any vows in that regard. It's just really messy and very dramatic, and I quite enjoyed it. And the fact, it's very dramatic that, and I mean that in a good way, that like he makes a decision to support the guy who just, stole the woman he loves, right? Like that's a very dramatic thing for a character to do that normally we would view as like very self-sacrificial and like heroic. But the trick is we know Kellis. And so we're like, is it heroic? Like he's not actually a messiah. Or I mean, is he? Is he a messiah? But like they're dark, this world's dark, horrible messiah. It's all complicated. It's messy and complicated, and I love it.
So my issue with like why I railed at Akamian that time was that he is just echoing thoughts he had before. It's not just out of anger. It's like, oh, I have confirmation of what I always knew to be true. And that is incredibly disrespectful. Their relationship was asymmetric to start with, and he made no effort. Like I think I talked about this briefly when we talked about doubt. Like for someone who teaches people to doubt, he has a very set view about the place of, I don't know if this is how he feels about women in general, but definitely about Esmeralda and the fact that she started out as a prostitute. So this, like, he's not willing to elevate her or think of her differently, and all the thoughts he had about her when returning to her had nothing to do, like, they weren't really affectionate thoughts. They were all, oh, I'm gonna go sleep with her now. So it was very um it was a very objectified view of her, almost to the point where I'm like, did you ever love her, or did you just want to, like her for the physical relationship? And maybe it's fine for that to happen, but I think Esmeralda deeply loves him, and I'm sure she gave him some emotional comfort, but he's he's just he's just escaped something really desperate. He's come out from really desperate circumstances, and he's not thinking of the emotional or mental comfort she'll give him, but just the physical comfort. And then as soon as he finds out, like, sure, he was happy that Kellis would keep her safe, but as long as she's saving herself for him, even if she thinks that he's dead. So they so the hatred, sure, he's just lashing out, but it felt very cold, not just out of anger, but it felt very cold, at least the way I read it. Maybe I primed myself to that because I was railing at the way he was thinking about, like, is that all she is to you? That So that really bothered me. And but yeah, I think the dynamic between that and what he's trying to do with Kellis, the sort of self-sacrificing but not really way that he's trying to protect Kellis. I think the thought he had before that was interesting, where he had this moment of, would I let the world burn to soothe my heart? But yeah, that whole section was interesting, but I'm kind of frustrated at Akamian. I mean, I still think the character's very interesting to read, especially, in the non-Esminate aspects of how he deals with, like, the way he stood up to the council and like told that story and, stood his own. I appreciated all of that, and I love that the distinctness that we see in the character from earlier, uh, because, like, so he went through something big, and that's reflected in how he's behaving right now. I think that's really well done. But as a person, or just I think I've started to really dislike him now. um,
Totally fair. I agree with everything you said. The only thing I would disagree about is I do think he loves her for more than just the sex. I mean, I think one of the messy aspects of them is the emotional comfort you're talking about. I think the sex is like, it's all tied together in his brain. And I think in her brain too, because I think he defined her exactly. Like he flattened her as an individual. I definitely think that's true. I think one of the most telling things, I think we talked about this last time, was that, he never tried or offered to teach her to read, right?
Yeah.
And you really, it hits her and it hits the reader, right? Like, yeah, that's like messed up. Why would he not, I think we did see him like try to, he would include her in conversations, even going back to like the conversations with Inrao. So I think there was a level of respect and love he carried beyond it. But I do think it was just mixed up in his internalized, sexism and kind of I do think it's tied into how he views women and how he views prostitutes. And it is really unfortunate and certainly is not the noblest thing about him. Far from it. He's an interesting character, a
Yeah,
complicated character.
and he's a teacher who's it must have occurred to him that he could teach her to read, and he decided not to, right? Or if it didn't occur, yeah.
I don't think it did. I don't think he ever thought of teaching her to read. I think he was like, oh, she's a woman and she's a prostitute. Like, of course she doesn't read. You know? Like I don't think it even occurred to him.
Yeah.
Isn't it great though to have these kind of reactions from a story, these conflicting feelings from these characters? And this is why one of the reasons why I think he's one of the more relatable characters, because of how imperfect and flawed he is. But I think giving Kellis a chance to get his claws into Espinette is really Kemian's fault, because he left her.
Yeah.
After he promised he would never leave her again, he just left her again, and then he ran into trouble. And there is a passage somewhere about Esmondette having feelings for Kellis even before, when Kemian was still around. So kind of get the feeling that Kellis has been working her for a while, just subtly.
Oh, definitely. He should have brought Esmondette. If he respected Esmondette enough, he should have brought her with him to the library. She maybe would have died. I don't know. She probably would have died, actually. So it probably saved her life. But, just in terms of like, as like an intellectual partner, he doesn't even talk about his emotions. Like again, when we're talking about like the emotional comfort he seeks, how many of these men or women really express their emotions, that much, and are like seek the sort of comfort we might typically, associate. Like I really do think it is all wrapped up in sex for them, and just like the physicality of it all. They don't know how to talk about their feelings. They're just emotionally, they're products of their cultures and products of their trauma.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, speaking of trauma, and what was everyone's thoughts on Surway?
Sad.
Yeah.
I'm underwhelmed, honestly, just with her story in general. I felt like she was underwritten until the end and then killed off. Like that's my thought. I don't have more to say than that.
I was disappointed in a few ways, but I'm also probably not catching things. So if I understood correctly, and I think there's different ways this could have been done, but she was killed because I thought, please let me know what you think. I thought she was killed because she was being a blasphemer, because she was saying he was the god. It wasn't until she said no.
Oh, sorry. I think it was because they were trying him for claiming to be of a higher caste than he is, and they were trying him according to the tusk, which the punishment for that is the wife is killed, and the offender is tied to the wife, and they die tied to them. Like that was in one of the epigraphs.
I missed that, so I didn't understand why. Okay, oh boy, yeah.
Yeah, I think because they called him a false prophet, and there is a section too where Noir, when he finds out that Survey was killed, he says they were supposed to kill the whore, and that was on page 532. So it sounds like he had a hand in that too, that he plotted to have Esmondette killed to clear the way for he and Survey to be, and I kind of felt like that was also a way for him to hurt Akamian too, if he was still alive, just to get rid of them. But he wanted her dead, not Survey.
I see.
What did Nair have against Akamian? I forgot.
Oh, I don't think that anything specific. I just think he's angry and bitter, hateful. So he just thought,
Mm.
and that was probably just like a bonus for him to, you know,
Mm.
kind of exert his power.
I
Yeah,
agree. That's certainly how I read it.
makes sense.
I mean, just to touch on the Surway thing, we've talked about how she just hasn't, necessarily felt like she's as well realized as three-dimensional as some of the other characters, and to some degree, I think that's an intentional choice. I think to kind of play with this idea of, kind of this archetype she embodies. I can't even really think of the right word for it, but kind of like the like the the modern like kind of other sexist term for it is like the bimbo, and it I don't know. I just felt like she never really went beyond that, and that disappointed me. And then to kill her, which is to me like the most obvious thing to do with her, just disappointed me. I was relieved the baby lived. I really thought the baby was dead. The way Baker wrote that whole sequence. I mean, I was sad she died, and I certainly didn't want her to die. But it was, I don't know. That would be a little I think if I were to ratings are so stupid, but like if I were to rate this book, I would still rate it 5 stars, but with like the caveat that I'm not actually without my criticisms, but I just found it overall like a really emotional, compelling experience. And like Sir Wei was one of, I think just an overarching criticism for me. And while we're talking about that, my only other thing was I felt like Kellis's downfall happened way too quickly. People have been talking about it for a long time, but I felt like the chapter itself, I wanted like a little more. It just felt like everything happened really fast, and I just wanted it to be a little more developed. I felt like everything that came after that, when he was just like hanging there in the circle and everything, was like paced really well. But for me, the actual downfall itself, that chapter, happened a little too fast. I almost wanted like another chapter, kind of chronicling all of that.
Hmm. I suppose we don't get to see in detail what they did to him. We just see Survey dead. Next thing, Callus is hanging from a tree. Uh, which I think what upset me the most about her death, I I couldn't. She felt pretty caricaturish the whole time to me, and
Yeah.
I I don't I don't see the point of her character in the sense, not that she wasn't useful in the story, but in the sense of I'm not sure what it was he was trying to represent. I still don't know. But but what angered me was that Kellis let it happen, and or what upset me about it. And I think the reason that it happened so quickly could be, is it perhaps that Kellis let it happen. So we don't need to see his downfall. Like, if we almost get the impression, I think, from Nayar's point of view later on, that it's not that he made it happen, but he let it happen because he wanted to lead to a certain conclusion, like get this thing over with and get to where I really want to be almost. Like it was somewhat deliberate on Kellis's part. So it almost feels like it went quickly because he doesn't because it's not an actual downfall. It's just something
Yeah,
that
it's
he
definitely part of
allowed
the
to
plan.
happen.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, I agree with that. I just felt like I literally think like the writing of the chapter itself was like to like there was amazing prose, some amazing scenes, including that final scene where Kellis is tried. It just like skipped around time a lot. It skipped around the city a lot. We were just like constantly hopping and changing, perspectives, and not just like different perspectives in the same thing, like wildly different days, different events. It was just a lot happened in a short period of time that for me, I sort of had like whiplash, because I felt like the rest of the book wasn't paced
Yes.
like that. Yeah,
Hmm.
go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. And I wrote down in my notes, like, was a big chapter. There was so much that happened. I think there's a lot going on with Sarcellus as well. Doesn't he get burned? There's and then Akamian comes back. There's a lot going on with Nair as well. So it's one thing that was interesting to me about with Kellis, but maybe this is very simple. But so he had all of these bodyguards and the supposedly tens of thousands of his followers, but where were they? I wondered about that, and they didn't seem to show up later when he was hanging from a tree, because I thought there was a lot of buildup with his, and then he has these 9 Nascenti or what have you. But maybe I was just digging into that too much.
No, I mean, I think it's a fair question to ask. Like, why didn't they do anything particularly? Because they were there when he was tried. Some of them were. I mean, maybe I do remember them being like kind of held back. But it is kind of surprising that they wouldn't,
They were even guarding him, right? Like when he was hanging from the tree. I thought they were the ones keeping watch.
Yeah, they were
Okay.
kind of sort of protecting him, but
yeah, but they didn't do anything. Maybe he forbade them to, or
that's a good point.
I mean, maybe all of it was according to his plan. Like the thing with you were saying he didn't care about Sarway. I don't think he ever cared about her once. I don't think he cares. I really don't think it's even mentioned in the what came before section. Like he's not. It's there. I didn't write it down, or I don't remember the exact words, but it's something about how like they're just. It's just about the logos. It's just about the logic and his ultimate goal. He doesn't. He's good at making it seem as though he's this gentle soul and leader and can quote the Tusk and all of these things. But he's such an enigmatic character. I don't think I've read anything like that before, but there must be some. That's one thing that's really unique about this whole story. He's just so. It was, to me, it's just like quite an idea that Bakker had here to come up. I guess he's kind of, this is terrible, but he's kind of like Spock from Star Trek a little bit. Like he's just all logic and not much emotion and all of that. And of course, that's a struggle that character goes through too. But, no, he's really fascinating. It's just I do feel like there is so much that happened in that chapter. There is a lot of buildup, or there's a lot of description throughout this book about what's happening with the Holy War. The one thing that I found interesting is how everybody is dealing with this famine, and they're all like skeletons essentially. And so I'm very impressed that anybody's able to still fight, because they're eating rats, they're eating leather and books, and that just added so much more attention. I appreciated that. I kept thinking that's, and then of course there's also the what's the epidemic going on, hemoplexy or something, similar to, I guess, bubonic plague, or maybe a little different. But all that's going on in the background, which I wanted to say I really appreciated. Not that I like that kind of thing, but it's not good. It's really awful. It's happened so much throughout history, famines that are not well documented in parts of the world that people don't maybe realize just over the years. And so I think that's pretty accurate.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I briefly touching on Serway's death again. I think it was, who was it? Someone, was saying, that like Kellis sort of allowed it to happen. And I don't even get, like, she didn't need to die. Like, it's not like she inspired anyone. She wasn't like a martyr. He was the martyr. So why did she need to die? Like it just all feels so pointless, which is part of the tragedy of it, certainly, but also is part of my frustration where I'm like, I wanted more from her, you know. If she felt like a more realized character, I think I would have like grieved her more. But I don't know.
Yeah. What do you think, Steve? What was her purpose in the story? Or,
Well, I have to be careful with how I answer that. But I will say that I think the whole sequence, I think, Carl, you nailed it. And I was trying to figure out what I didn't like about it, but when you talked about pacing, it does happen very fast. Like it goes from him being followed to he seemed worried, and then Surway's killed, and then he's hanging from a tree, and it just seemed to happen very fast after all this build up, and we don't really see how he was captured or what like how they managed to get him after he's been so formidable in combat, and it seemed like he could defeat pretty much anyone. He could have killed Noir about twice. So it seemed a little like something was missing from the point where Surway's killed to when they're hanging up together. It just like it seemed a little bit jarring that, well, how did that happen? So, but Surway, I think. Okay, let's see how I can answer this. So from this point, I think so. Surway, what has she done to this point, to up until her death? So she's given birth to Moingus, which I thought was a little bit of a that and that that had to have been done to elicit some kind of response too, right? So you wonder if Kellis did that on purpose so Noir would push his enemies to push for him to be tried as a false prophet. So there's lots of different things happening because they intentionally told him, they were told to intentionally make sure that he knew they named the baby Moingus. You know, of course, he's going to not have a not so great reaction to that.
For sure.
But
Absolutely.
Kellis being Kellis, I guess.
yeah.
How do we think he survived? Like, just like, is that a Logos thing or like sheer willpower? Like, Surway, I mean, maybe she took a more serious wound, but like, my understanding is they like flayed Kellis, like, or at the very least, like whipped the crap out of him. And he didn't get, his wounds didn't get infected. I mean, I guess maybe some of his followers, they might have said something about followers coming up and like cleaning his wounds or something, although maybe I'm making that up. I don't remember. I'd have to reread. But it's just like, it seems like he was in a really bad place for like several days. And like, I guess through sheer willpower, the Logos, I don't know, managed to survive. That was one of my like, yeah, this is a fantasy novel. Like, I guess I'll suspend my disbelief for this one.
He did survive the 7 days of meditation without food or anything else when he was just a child. You have to assume that his training may have been amped up several times from there. But yeah,
That's
it
great.
does stretch the imagination a bit for sure.
Yeah, I think what you were saying, Steve, makes so much sense, and I think everything that he does is for a purpose. Pretty much. And if you think about it later, after he's freed, they make a flag of the, I want to say circumfix. Is that the name of the symbol of them? Because it's a circle of the two bodies, and I'm just trying to picture them in my. Maybe I misunderstood. It was a ring of the two of them. I thought that in my head, does that mean that they were like wrapped around the tree? But I think they were. I also thought they were hanging. So
they were. So I while looking at fan art, I found a picture of the flag. So it's like the classic like Leonardo da Vinci art of like the human anatomy, where like the human is like all spread eagle and everything.
Okay.
It's Kellet, the flag that we see towards the end, and what they're on is like just a big ring, and that ring essentially holds them spread eagle, and they are pressed up against each other. And so they're both just like, they're just tied out, like you know, it's like a cross, but instead of a cross, they're like tied to this big ring, and that ring is hanging from a tree.
Okay. So that, I mean, I guess he wanted that. You know, it became like the symbol of the cross, which is, as we know, and you know, in Christianity is a pretty big deal.
For sure.
And is that what's going to happen in the next? So I am predicting something here, if it's okay, that in the next, I have no idea what happens in the next book, but I'm assuming that his followers are going to overtake the Holy War. And that's what I'm guessing, because there's so many of them now. There's tens of thousands, and there's only so many left from quite a few that died from the famine and from the illness, because he's gaining a lot of momentum, and this is going to be enough to push him over, you know, to the tipping point. But then I also have a question which is unresolved, and maybe you all understood it better than I did, and that's the title of the next book, is there's something about how he has possibly attained the thousandfold thought. And I forget exactly when that happens, but I thought it was might have been right after this. But I don't know what that means. I don't think it's explained yet, but I just feel like the whole Holy War is going to be changing momentum quite a bit. It has been. So to me, that's a trend. I see it just going up, you know, even further. I don't know what that means exactly, but to me, it's just really, this is going to put him over the top.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I think that's what we see at the end, is he's basically taken over the Holy War. I think that's his whole arc here in this book is him conquering it, basically, claiming it as his own. You know, this was the other lords like attempt at stopping that, and instead they made it inevitable. You know, I think he may not officially be in charge, but I think he basically is at the end of it all. It's like at that point they tried to kill him, they failed, they made him a martyr, and now he's, you know, the top dog. I mean, that's how I read it, kind of at the end of it all. And they all had to kind of accept that they need him. You know, they were convinced quite reluctantly, you know, that the consult is real and that he is Onasur Kellis, and they need him to fight. And now he is even more, you know, symbolically powerful because he, quote unquote, you know, like died and came back to life. Even though I guess he never actually died. Yeah, that's
even Confus is. Do we think Confus is convinced?
No chance. No, he's reluctantly going along just because he's one of the generals, but I don't know. He's going to keep scheming. Confus ain't done yet. No chance.
So, what did all of you think when Kellis was hanging, his inner dialogue? Because I felt like that was very. He was almost like questioning how could this have happened, or, you know, that was a little bit surprising to me that it's almost like he didn't see it coming, or like he wasn't sure what to do next.
I definitely got the sense that things got out of hand a little bit for him. Like, I think he was planning things. Like, we know, again, he wanted Nair to find out about the son's name. Like, he clearly was like wanting to create his own downfall so he could rise up again. But it seems like things did get out of hand, and, you know, exactly where the dividing line is there, I'm not sure. But beyond that, like, one of the additional things we know is he started feeling more things. That was really interesting to read. To have him like very explicitly and clearly lose, you know, the logos, to fall into the darkness that comes before, including, you know, something we talked about last time. He seemed to explicitly express affection for Esmenet and his unborn child and his newborn child, Moingus, you know, their blood. Like, he felt that instant blood attraction, which is, you know, biologically programmed into every species. We got to procreate. And he couldn't, he fell victim to it, I guess you could say. Certainly that would be his point of view, which was interesting to see him, to see that flickering of weakness, I guess you could say. Vulnerability is maybe a better word. And I think that troubled him, I probably even more so than everything around him kind of falling apart, because I think to some degree it was part of his plan. I think his internal battle was what was really troubling him, and why he, was really questioning everything. But that's just my reading. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that was surprising. I'm not sure. Yeah, maybe he thought he let things get out of hand, but more than that, I think what he allowed to happen was intentional, but he wasn't anticipating how he felt about it. Like, I think this whole thought sequence starts with him demanding that commanding Survey to breathe, but she doesn't. And then he has this whole dialogue with his father
Yeah.
about how he gave her to them, and he says, like, I gave her to them for you. So he I, it sounds like he allowed it to happen. I don't know whether he wasn't anticipating the feelings that he would experience afterwards, so he's getting the impression that things are in disarray. That's the word he uses. All is in disarray. Yeah, so perhaps he's out of his depth. I mean, they must feel out of their depth sometimes, right? Like, I think the logos or whatever they follow, I must be about gaining control back whenever you lose it too. There has to be provision for that, I'd imagine. But yeah, anyway, so I agree with everything you said, Carl, but it was very interesting that he's experiencing some emotion here that he wasn't expecting.
I'm so
And
glad you pointed out the Surway thing, because he mourned her there. Like,
Mhm.
he didn't want her to die. And so that definitely made me wonder, was his plan for her to survive? We know he had I mean, if you remember way back, he had that vision of everything that we questioned. Is it magic, or is it just part of his logos, predicting the future thing, the shortest path, what have you? And we had the head in the air with the sunset, which I now understand to be Nair holding up the consult, Sarcellus's head, and the dead wife we heard about, which is Surway. And I don't know that he necessarily knew that was going to happen. I mean, even though he had the vision, I think in some ways that surprised him too. And maybe that was the aspect of it that felt the most like out of his control. I don't know that I mean, like I said earlier, like, it didn't seem like Surway needed to die. So I don't know that
Mm.
that was his intent. You could definitely say he let it happen because he didn't really try to stop it. But I don't know that he went to that trial thinking she was going to die too. I think
I
he
mean,
went there thinking he was going to be martyred.
we know how he is in a fight. He held it together on a hill all by himself in the previous battle that we saw. So he could have hurt all of them and stop them from hurting Survey if he wanted to, but he used her for a purpose. And I just now remembered, as you were talking about the prophecies, that one of the things that was prophesied was a dead wife, right? So I guess that's Survey.
Yeah.
And
Hmm.
we don't we faded to black after he saw all of that, but let's say for a moment that he knew this was coming, or even planned for it, that he plotted, if we go with the theory that it he predicted that, by that he has to take a certain path to get to that point. That means all of this was deliberate to the point of Survey's death. What was I going to say about that? So yeah, I don't know. I don't know if he didn't intend for Survey to die. I think he just didn't intend to mourn her, which he is currently doing.
So I would, where I would argue with you is that I think while he does make plans, I think they can be, and in fact are, imperfect, and that sometimes they're more accurate than others. But like, he has trouble here predicting the future. Like, he has an explicit moment, I forget where it is, but I remember being like, whoa, he doesn't know what's happening. The future seems shaky to him. And I think one of those, maybe the reason he took two wives is so that one of them could die.
Mm.
So maybe that it's that aspect to it, right? But I don't know that he necessarily specifically intended for Surway to die. His reaction just doesn't, to me, read like that. To me, it's kind of like, again, like genuine surprise and genuine mourning,
Mm.
as much as he can mourn, and him willing her to breathe again. Like, that's such a great moment. And does make him feel a little more human, despite how horrible and cold he is. I don't know. I think he lays out these plans, but I don't know that how everything played down was exactly how he thought it was going to play down. Like I think he set these pieces in motion, but he wasn't sure exactly what the result would be. And that's part of the reason. And in one aspect of it, I think, was that then he emotionally lost control. And I think that really troubled him, probably more than anything, more even than
Mm.
Surway's death. I totally am with you there that, like, I think his reaction to it all was probably the most troubling part for him.
Yeah.
But I don't know that his plans are like these infallible, perfect things. I think there is room for error, and I think he's aware of that and becomes viscerally aware of that with how everything plays out.
Yeah, no, I agree that his plans are not quite infallible, but that he that he saw that this is the end goal. Maybe his vision or prediction or prophecy, whichever it was telling him is that this is the point you need to get to take over the holy war. Because do I remember correctly that that prediction happened before he started becoming a prophet?
Yeah,
Because and we see the dead wife thing is from the law of the tusk, right? So let's say that Akamian has taught him all of that. So that could have been input data to his predictions that he needs to get here. So uh, yeah,
that's an
it
interesting thought.
it's possible that this plan happened to work out, but it is still like, yeah, that's my theory, that it was a plan that he laid out to get here for that end goal, that this is how he wins the holy war. And
Specifically, Surway's death, or
Mhm.
okay, yeah, yeah.
It's
I mean, I
service
don't
that,
know.
like, all of that, all of his entire vision was around this moment, right? Like, you pointed that out, I didn't realize it until you did, but his entire vision was around when he's persecuted for being the warrior prophet, and like with the excuse that he claimed to be a prince, right? So that's the end point. Now the holy war is his, and what he was meditating on then was how to make the holy war his own. If do I remember that correctly? So
I don't remember distinctly, but that sounds likely. And I think, again, I would have to reread it detailed to like really look at all of the kind of the foreshadowing and be like, oh, it does map onto everything here.
mm,
Because I think it's possible it just kind of maps onto the general plot of this book with
yeah.
some distinct images from this particular section. But certainly there are those images. Like, the head has to be Nair with Sarcellus, right?
Mm.
And the dead wife is clearly Surway. So in that regard, the vision is definitely about this, at least that portion of it. Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, I both agree. I don't know.
Yeah,
I'm
no, I I think there's nothing to say one way or the other. It just, knowing the character, it seems more likely to me that he, if not necessarily planned, he knew that this is what will get him the holy war, and he allowed all of it to happen. The more cynical interpretation, which I think would still apply, is that he he caused it to happen. And then, of course, there's the third option, which is that some of it, at least, he didn't plan for, but it happened anyway.
That's what I'm leaning towards. Is I think the general events he intended,
Hmm.
but some of the details, including Surway dying, or maybe even like maybe he was thinking Ezimanet would be the one who dies. Like I don't know.
Yeah.
I I just think that he seemed suitably surprised. And as for the question of, well, why didn't he fight back? One, I think even he couldn't beat everyone, 1,000 people swarming him. But two, it's a lot harder to I think it's a stronger martyrdom to just give in peaceably, as opposed to fighting back. And beyond that, I think it would be harder to stop himself from getting injured in such a way that he could not recover from. I think if he actively fought back, and if someone cuts off his head, like, what is he going to do? I don't think even he can survive that. So I think that's some of why he went peacefully. That is my speculation there.
And
Yeah.
he was going up against Sarcellus, who we find out later is like this ultimate fighter, because Nair was losing to him. So maybe he knew that.
Great duel, by the way. If we want to transition to Nair's stuff, I loved his storyline here. I was sad to see, but not at all surprised to see him be like, "Oh yeah, my the solution to all my inner turmoil is to embrace being a monster and to just be the worst man that I set out to be." It was, oh Nair, oh Nair.
Classic.
Yeah. What was it that he figured out about Kellis's plan? I don't think I understood that.
That
The secret of battle kept saying, is that what it was referring to?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, I read that as him knowing that Callus was intentionally martyring himself,
Right.
and was going to survive through sheer conviction.
Exactly.
The secret of battle. That's how Callus survived, was conviction, and that's how they ultimately win the big battle at the end.
I see.
Like Mike was talking about how these are starving people. What's the only thing they're feeding on is just their zealotry. Their blind religious faith. Like that's what keeps them going, and that's what made them win, I guess, in the end. It's certainly thematically a potent statement, potent thing that Bakker's exploring there.
Comes up again later in chapter 25 that the secret of battle is conviction and belief, and a lot of discussion about belief and truth that comes up over and over again, and is even the saying, the truth shines or whatever, which is kind of like a, God be with you, or I don't know what you call it. But that's fascinating to me, because all along, I think one of the themes is that, truth is a farce, or, well, it's the opposite of what Akamian seems to believe, right? Which is you do need to kind of question things. You need to, and it seems that, we see this in politicians and leaders, right, all the time. I think this is commentary on that, is that people that just do have conviction and believe, and maybe they're not always enlightened about what they believe or what they're doing. I don't care if we go into it, but there's a lot of examples out there that we see. It's even in Dune,
Totally,
quite a lot. And I know that, not to go completely on a tangent here, but Frank Herbert was he was a speechwriter for politicians. I think he just got fed up with, and I just see that here coming up with that even though that seems to win for him here, there is that running theme of this kind of conviction and belief is not necessarily the best thing, but it's winning. It's winning the battle here, and and he's convincing. I have no idea, but throughout so much, at least American history, there's been all of these, um, they're not prophets, but they're like cult leaders and that sort of thing. And if you think about them, they're very charismatic. They're very well liked. They have their conviction. So I do appreciate that theme coming up in here a lot.
Absolutely.
It's really I noted that, for especially this last part. Yeah, go ahead.
I mean, I think the parallels to Dune are a great thing to point out, and totally intentional. And we know it's a big inspiration for this series, and you can see it. And I think Callus is clearly a Paul Atreides figure. And strangely, well, I'm not in a debate which one is better or worse as a person, but I will give this series credit because it's a trilogy. I think it explores the power of that sort of conviction and that zealotry in a way that is even more impactful than Dune does, because you really get to see it play out over and over again and see different scenarios, how it can shape things and the danger of it, and that it's dangerous because it is powerful, because it does shape the world.
It works.
It works, exactly. Like it absolutely works. And so it's so easy, to fall into it if you just are convinced that you have all the answers, or this one person you're following has all the answers. And again, it's warning, like Frank Herbert was, against sort of this unceasing, unblinking belief in charismatic leaders that, it's good, and beyond, I think, any individual ideas too, that you should be more, a skeptic, you could say. Kamian, sort of the perpetual skeptic, right, where you challenge your own thoughts and the thoughts of others, and that you don't just accept things blindly, but you're constantly looking for enlightenment, I guess you could say. But also, I guess part of that sort of train of thought too is that enlightenment is impossible, and that the whole way to kind of attempt enlightenment is like, that's what matters. I guess it makes you wonder about Kellis too, because he is, in many ways he's like a rationalist, but he is a rationalist to the nth degree, where it's like it is a religious belief for him too, right? Like he's not skeptical about the Logos. He's not skeptical about the darkness that comes before. He drinks the Kool-Aid too, of the Dune Yang. He starts to face some doubts here, right? Like he starts to wonder, like, does it work? What is the 1,000-volt thought? What's all that? But he himself is a zealot, just a zealot of a different ideology. And I think it's really wonderfully explored here. It's certainly one of the highlights, I think, of this reading experience.
And bringing it back to Nayur, is he's the only one that seems to know what's up still with Kellis. And he's the one that basically sees not just Kellis, but also the Men of the Tusk as being delusional. Kamian doesn't really know. We know what his thing is, right, with the consult and all that, but he doesn't really know what Kellis is about. He still thinks, which is one of the things that I found really interesting, is like, so he, towards the end here, does that mean that the decision ultimately that Kamian makes to carry out what was written in the missive from Maithanet, I guess, he didn't have to stand up for Kellis there, really. I mean, he is. But so because there was a moment where he's kind of realizes who he is, that he's conning everybody. So he's still kind of wondering what's pushing him, and why he hasn't contacted his people, or why they haven't contacted him.
Well, I can tell you my interpretation of it, certainly, because you raise an interesting point there, is that even a Kamian who is purported to be a skeptic you know, and certainly takes pride in that and challenges other people, Proyas most of all, to embrace. He takes his visions, you know, for granted. He takes the prophecy of Anasurimbor, you know, returning and as a harbinger of the second apocalypse and as perhaps the only hope of stopping it. You know, he takes all of that for granted. He or not for granted. He like takes it to heart. He's like, this shouldn't be questioned. It's fact. And Kellis, regardless of his personal failings, is our savior. He never challenges that thought. He never once thinks, well, maybe he's not. You know, maybe he's hurt by Kellis because of Esmenet, but he never like he too falls into the same pitfalls of just that conviction. He's like, okay, I have this ideology and you know of the mandate schoolmen and you know and of Seswatha. And you know you can wonder too, is that Seswatha inside of him, like those memories sort of, I mean, they've clearly shaped his whole life. Like he's, I mean, I guess you could call that the darkness that comes before, in a sense, right? Or as a part of it for his version of that, where it's like he can't cut himself off from that. It's all, yeah, it's interesting. It's fascinating. They all have their convictions, and oof, leads them astray.
Not to backtrack too much, but we talked about Kellis and him being tried. When Esmenet comes to warn him that they're going to try him, he tells her on page 519, sometimes we must cross death to reach our destination.
Great quote, too. Yeah.
So he knew what was coming.
It's so interesting to me that Kellis, yeah, I think he definitely knew that was coming, but that he is this sort of subversion of kind of the Jesus Christ narrative, but the faith he's coming into already sort of has that. I mean, I guess we don't fully know the full like Inri Sejanus story, but we also know he was like a martyred prophet who, you know, preached the modern version of the Tusk. It's just interesting to me that like it's sort of this like almost like repeating narrative, which maybe that's the point, you know, that he's like taking advantage of sort of this like cultural, historical, mythic cycle. But like, you know, you have everything down to like Nair being Judas Iscariot and getting paid in silver to betray him. And, you know, Esmenet, I think, kind of fills the Mary Magdalene roles. And it's interesting. Again, just because, I mean, on a lot of levels, it certainly adds additional subtext to it all. But that this religion already has their sort of their prophet, and he's now coming in and is like, no, I'm the new big deal, but the same sort of narrative, I guess. I don't know. We'll see how he changes it, right? Like how he's changing the religion.
Sorry, I was looking at Mary Magdalene.
She's a prostitute, a former prostitute who followed Jesus in the Bible.
Interesting.
Okay. And there's a lot of theology around the idea that she maybe was, you know, there are theories and stuff. Theologians argue about it. Maybe the wife of Jesus. It's yeah. There's a lot around the sort of the lore, you could say, of Mary Magdalene. She's not necessarily one of the like most widely talked about figures, you know, not like Jesus or the Mother Mary, but she has an interesting place. And I wondered, as soon as Esmenet was introduced as a prostitute, if that's what we were going to get. And indeed, that is what we have gotten. We'll see where her story goes. I don't know. I have no idea still what he wants with her. Is it truly, does he just like actually kind of care for her? Like, I don't know.
I thought, I don't know, this seems almost as dumb as the one where he probably cares for her, but does he just want her to have his child? Is that
maybe? Yeah,
that's a potential purpose for her now, but I don't know. It's weird.
She is a vessel. So
yes.
is that
one thing I wanted to apologize for last week. I for some reason thought she was like 39, 40, and I saw on the glossary she's like 31. So yeah, she's totally like easily can have kids. You know, I for some reason was under the impression she was like a decade older than she is. But she is not. It's just the way she talks about her. It's the sexism again, right? Where she's described as like aged and things, and it's like, oh my god, she's 31 years old. Like she's younger than my older sister. Like she's younger than my older brother. Like it's crazy. Yeah.
Yeah, that was the thing about it, right? I don't know. I thought she was in her late 20s because I don't know if it was this book or somewhere else, but apparently, for a prostitute greater than 25 or something, I think it was in this book, is considered old. So anyway, uh, new topic. The when Kellis is hanging from the tree, the no god talks to him, or he hears the no god like a Kamian does. So is he starting to see Seshwata's dreams? What do you guys know what happened there?
He was dreaming, right? I think he was dreaming. Yeah, that was really something. I don't know what was happening. I was going to ask you all. But maybe there is some connection between his people and Seswata, I think, because they were from the same time. So maybe, but yeah, it's a good question.
I think
that maybe Akamian taught him enough things so that now he can channel Seswata. I don't know. I doubt it.
he wasn't.
He didn't.
He
didn't give him that, right? He didn't give him the gnosis. Like that was the one thing he'd yet to do. He was planning on teaching him the gnosis, but he went off to library. So he just like, I mean, yeah, I don't know if he managed to like transmute what Akamian had taught him somehow in to like touching the gnosis. I don't know.
Or has the no god become powerful enough that one doesn't have to be a mandate schoolman to feel that he's around? Or is he seeing prophetic visions?
Oh, you know what? I bet that's what it is. That hadn't even fully occurred to me. But I'm telling you, that one at the start of the book, like I don't think he's just calculating things. I think he's seeing the future. Like this is magic shit. Like we're past the like, oh, I'm sciencing the shit out of this. Like
I think, let's say, for argument's sake, let's say the thing with a dead wife and a severed head against the burning sun is prediction, not prophecy. The other stuff seems, and I don't know if this happened in this book. Nameless schoolman climbing a steep gravelly beach. That hasn't happened yet, right? A nipple pinched between fingers, whatever the heck that means. A gasping climax. I assume that's related to the nipple. Apparitions marching out of a severed head. We already talked about apparitions marching out of morning mist.
Wait,
those are all the things that I think haven't happened.
And
where is that prophecy?
In the Kindle book, it's page 271.
It's in here.
Chapter 9. It's the end of chapter 9.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I don't remember that at all.
Don't forget, we have another severed head with Martimus. He gets beheaded too.
Oh, you're right. It could be Martimus.
And Confus keeps the head.
But I think also isn't.
Not
I think we have 3 heads. Isn't there a Sarcellus? The thing called Sarcellus. Isn't he decapitated too?
Mm-hmm.
Well, who's the third then? That was the first one we named.
Oh, what's the head that is that the head that Akamian has? Because I thought he picked it up earlier.
I think he just had the spider minus the head. But for Sarcellus, was it the head or the spider?
Both, yes, all of the above, because that's what it is.
Face spider.
It's like, it's hard to picture, and I still like, I don't believe I necessarily can. But the spider like curls up and forms a head.
Mhm.
And is that the consult? Is that the creature?
Yes.
So
That's
whatever got
inside.
burnt, that thing is dead. But as long as it's able to escape from the body, it
Yeah.
is alive. Okay.
Yes. And this is, again, remember, this is not the thing called Sarcellus. There was one before who died.
Right.
And then this is the number 2.
Well, and then, so the thing before is the one that was posing as Kellis, right?
It is the same one.
Yeah.
The
The
current
same one.
Sarcel is also post as Kellis. Yes.
Yeah.
But so do we think that the face is dead? This face is definitely dead? I'm not sure.
Dead. It seemed dead.
Did it crawl away in the end? I forget. I forget what happened to
I need
Thing
to go back.
Sarcellus.
I don't think it disappears. I think it gets like burned or something.
Hmm.
Steve, what happens to the face hugger?
That would be so pathetic. I'm gonna be honest. If Nayer's like holding this thing up, like, look at this, and then it's just like it escapes. Like, no, because then Acamian burns it. It's the same one, right?
Okay.
That's then Acamian shows it. It's dead, and then they
I
burn
thought
it.
those two happen in parallel. I thought those two things happen in parallel. Because Acamian was showing the thing. So Kellis sent Acamian to find a burnt one in the yard. Acamian took that to the council. And what was happening in the council, Sarcellus was repeating, except Nair caught him out on it and said, "How do you know that? I followed you."
Yes.
So wait, are there
He
3
hadn't said that.
Sarcelluses then?
No, I think there are several consult. The one that Acamian held up might have been a non-Sarcellus consult, right?
Okay.
I think it was. Yeah.
Where did he get that one? I don't remember.
That's what I couldn't remember. But I'm pretty sure it was a different one because it was like rotting and stuff.
Yeah. I don't know how it got there, but Kellis sent Acamian to the yard or somewhere to go get it. But I don't know how it got there. Yeah.
Okay.
So
that was a
the
cool
consult is like 3 different. There's like 3 different like beings. One is the space thing. One is the bird with the pink head, little crow, and the third one is what's in the very last chapter. Is I understood, which was the Incoroi, like with
which is the space thing,
with a thing that's like sliced, the head that's sliced with another face, like.
I had to look it up. If you guys don't want to, I didn't get spoiled on anything.
I can't do
it. It's basically like if you've seen any of the Aliens movies, it's like one of those xenomorphs. If its face where its mouth is had a human face inside.
Yeah, well, I was thinking
basically is like it's like a human head wearing one of the xenomorph heads. Is kind of what it looks like.
Mm-hmm.
It's freaky. It's cool. I'm not gonna lie. I saw it. I was like, oh, that's what it is. I'm like, okay, that's cool. It's very fantasy. Like it looks a little goofy, but it also looks really cool. I was here for it. There's some cool fan art out there. I was surprised.
What did you search for the fan art, or like what was it a fan art of?
I think I did Warrior Prophet Incoroi or something like that. Or
look it up, Varsha.
Yeah, thanks.
Anyway, yeah, they're I definitely got some fan art of the scene with Kellis and Surway and the ring, and then Nair with the head. There are a few cool, people have drawn some stuff. I was pleased with the finds. No. So my understanding is the thing we see at the end is that's one of the consult, and that is one of the Incoroi.
Right.
The Synthes may also be one of the Incoroi. The bird with the old man's head. They, through Techne, which is called the old science, which may or may not be magic. It may just be some mad science stuff. They make the skin spies because they're like sci-fi aliens. I mean, I literally think they're almost like the xenomorphs if they were slightly more intelligent and like all of that stuff in a fantasy setting. Like they like for whatever reason came to this world and decided it was going to be theirs. And then they got involved, we found out, with the no god. They did not come with him. They were separate, and then they found him and decided, we like you. You're going to work for us now.
I thought he was awakened by not the Inkoroi, but humans who learned the arts of the Inkoroi, right?
Well, the Inkoroi didn't the Inkoroi try first, and then they got beaten, and then the humans went and found him after that. After the Inkoroi had been fought back.
So the same place. So they built something somewhere. What was that? And these guys went and disrupted it and awoke the no god,
Yeah.
right? What did they build? There was a hole in the world. It was of another realm, they said.
Yeah, the no men did the whole magic, like locked away sort of. There was a glamour, I know, so that no one could find it. And
it's
Golgotha. Yeah, where that place is. We got yet more names for it. I can only remember.
There was a huge exposition dump there.
I enjoyed it. I liked getting to hear that.
Didn't mind it either.
It reframed a lot of things, definitely, in an interesting way.
Is that the same place where Sauron had his vision?
No, that was the plains of Megiddo.
Yeah.
Which is where the final battle with the no god happened, versus where I think that's where they were trying to resurrect him, but that's not where he originally was.
He died there.
Yeah.
So Golgotha, have we? That sounds familiar. Have we seen that name before?
Yes,
it's on the map.
Oh,
it is the consult place. Like it's Mordor. It's Mordor. That's what we've been hearing, and we've heard it referred to as Golgotha, however you say it.
Okay.
A good number of times.
It's at the very far north, and actually just south of there is also mentioned in this section, where I assume is where the non-men still live, which is Injor Nias. Maybe that's the name of the region, and then the town is Ishtarabinth. I do like maps. I look at some of these places I mentioned. I'm like, where the heck is that? And I was, lo and behold, this, some of the names, I couldn't find on there, but this non-men stronghold or area and Golgotha are both on there.
Which the talk of non-men, who I'm excited to see more of eventually, but we did get this. Some of them are working with the consult now.
Yep.
That was made me sad. I'm not gonna lie. I mean, not that we got good vibes about the non-men, but they were fighting with the humans before, and now they're at least some traitors. Not good. Not good.
I thought the non-men were the cons. No, they weren't. But I thought they were always with the consult. No?
No.
Is that not right?
Unless my memory is incorrect, which is very possible, our only understanding was they fought against the consult. The consult I think have become clear, are the aliens. Or maybe they're just part of, I don't know, the consult's probably just a name for the order at this point, right? Because we have the term Inkoroi for the race itself of aliens.
Is the consult the descendants of that school that Akamian mentioned? He mentioned one school of sorcery who the followers of which went and reopened that place and awoke the no god.
Maybe.
Is that who the consult is?
I don't know.
Yeah.
That's a dense
some
section.
diagrams.
I was told by you all that I don't need to read too deeply into this. So I just read through it. I think once I could have, gone back, because I get caught up on some of these names big time.
I think we're doing a little break between for the next couple of weeks before we start the 1,000-volt dot, and I think during that I maybe am going to reread some of these little sections at the end, kind of dig into the first apocalypse a bit more.
It's very long.
Yeah. So I want to start a new topic, but before that, quick question. I thought Cinemas had his mouth hurt or something. That's why he said bees when they had him. But then the people in the end also said bees instead of please let us go. So what is that word?
No, I think it is please. I think you're right. I think they just had their mouth hurt, and that's how Bakker writes it in like kind of a slightly goofy way. I mean, I read it the same way, that it's just please, but their like teeth are punched in.
Okay, makes sense. So, the Norman or the consul, who is it, says that we are a race of lovers. We've seen that before in an epigraph. I have to say, this is really far away from any imagination I had of what a race of lovers might be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, not in this. Yeah, it's a different culture, I guess. So.
Yeah,
we also get description of the strength too. But sorry, they get turned on by death, destruction,
by everything apparently.
Everything, yeah.
Maybe, yeah. It's still unclear to me what that. Yeah, that's fascinating.
Yeah, that was a really twisted. I mean, usually in poetry, which is where we first encountered this concept of a race of lovers, it's meant to be something romantic / poetic, something nice, that some actual love associated with the term. But oh my god, this was so twisted when compared to, I guess, what the default interpretation might have been in poems. I don't know. What did you make of it?
It definitely feels ironic. I mean, I'm with you. It's wow, yeah.
Are you referring to the necrophilia that happens?
Just everything. So the consult, whenever we've met them, first all the things that Sarcellus, the thing called Sarcellus, gets turned on by. He wants to kill people, and then I think he said something to that effect to Nair or Kellis too about what he'll do with Survey. And anyway, we got a bunch of impressions from him about all the things that turn him on, none of which was anything remotely good. I think the crow person at some point does something that was disturbing, and then the consult who slept with Esmenet. I don't know if that's the same one. Was that Sarcellus too? And then finally, what happens here? The rape scene in the end. Yeah. All of that is disgusting, borderline disgusting, and not borderline. It is disgusting, and the creatures who indulge / engage in these activities are calling themselves a race of lovers.
Yeah, the last chapter we would be remiss if there wasn't a reference to Black Seed.
Oh yeah.
Anytime I read it, I have to vomit a little bit in my mouth.
I wrote down black jizz, but I'm not a writer. I'm not
very poetic.
Just as poetic as race of lovers. Oh my god. That seems like such a twisting of that phrase. That's all. Those are my feelings on it. It's hard to wrap my head around this is who is meant by this phrase.
It
No,
almost makes it worse, right? That they call
Yeah.
themselves a race of lovers.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Do you guys have any theories about what their deal is? Like why they're so afraid of the consult? Like, do they just think the consult is like the only group powerful enough to, or not? Sorry, not the consult, the Sisharim, because they're essentially orchestrating this whole holy war to destroy the Sisharim. It seems like the consult are. So I'm curious what y'all's thoughts are on that.
Is that tied to the fact that so I think it became clear in this section that the reason they thought they were spies, that the spies of Caesarum were not because of the face thing, but because you can't see their sorcery, right? That's so. Do the Caesarum have the Techne magic thing? So is that what makes them fearsome?
Oh, interesting thought. That they can identify them. Yeah, I
They
don't know.
cannot be perceived by the few. The Sisharam are not.
They cannot be,
Is
or
that
they
the right
can.
word? Is that the right wording?
Yes,
It's in there.
cannot be.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yes, they're not viewed as magic users.
I mean, yeah, they clearly have the magic, but it works differently. So they don't have the bruising that appears, I guess, on the other magic users, including the mandate schoolmen.
So
Which we don't know what's up with that. I suspect we will find out in the next book, but we currently do not know. That's my theory. I'll drop a theory. We're going to find out why we don't see the mark on them next book. We'll figure out what's going on with the Sisharim. I do not think we will have to wait until the next series. This was a mystery set up early on. We will find out.
Do you think that we're going to see more of the other side of things? I think you mentioned that, Carl. I don't know if it was the last chat or earlier, but I totally agreed with you. I wanted to know. I want to know more about the Kianin, the Sisharim. We just get little glimpses. I'm not convinced that they're. I'm not convinced that they're bad. You know what I mean? Like I'm not convinced that they're the bad guys, or I don't know if that's the right way of putting it. But like, what are their motives? I guess they've taken over part of. They view Sejanus as a false prophet themselves, or they reject him. So they're it's just another belief system,
right?
But we don't know. There's so much questions on that side of things that I have, including obviously Moingus, and whether or not he. You talked about it the last time in depth. It was really intriguing. Moingus is not training the Sisharim as though they're Dunyain, but it's maybe giving them something. We don't know what. We don't. Well, they're people with no eyes, and they have snakes. I don't. You know what I mean? Like it doesn't connect. I don't see the connections, yet with Moingus and the Dunyain and all of that, and then at the very end, of course, the consult still don't have any clue who the Dunyain are.
I am increasingly convinced that the reason Bakker is not showing us their point of view is because it would give away all the secrets.
Right.
And because that's where Moingus is involved and has his own sect. They have this mystery of the magic of why, you can't see them, even though they're one of the few, technically. I think it's just because all the secret, and it's wrapped up with the consult stuff now. I think that's why is, we're surrounded by a bunch of people who don't know what's going on, even Kellis to an extent. Kellis knows more than a lot of people, but he's a fish out of water, right? Like he didn't know magic was real until he left home. So I think that's why we're not seeing it, is because the Sisharim lie at the center of a lot of these mysteries. Which is still like I would I like when we see more of them, but I understand now why Bakker has been keeping them at arm's reach.
Yeah, definitely.
And I'm with you, Mike. I don't think they're the like bad guys per se. I mean,
Mhm.
you know, they are antagonistic to the characters we follow, but they're just another faction. You know, I mean, I wouldn't call them the good guys either. Like I'm sure we've seen them; they have slaves and things. Like like I think they're just
Yeah.
they're just people, but potentially people who pose a real threat to the consult, which is interesting.
Mhm. Right. That's why I said it's not the right word, but they're it's yes, they pose a threat exactly, and they need to be crushed.
They need to be crushed.
Oh my God! You know what just occurred to me? They totally killed the head of the Scarlet Spires because he was like a skin spy or something. I bet that's why they assassinated him. We haven't had that confirmed, but I'm willing. I would put that money down. Theory established. I mean, I'm sure we'll figure it out next book, but that's been one of the things. Why did they kill the head of the Scarlet Spires when there was a peace and starting this war? I bet they did it because he was consult.
Mhm.
And they were like, taking out the enemy. They're waging a secret war against the consult.
The guy we found out that what's his name, Kefir Amuni, isn't he? He's like from the same region as the Scarlet Spires, I think. Is that
Yes.
who you're referring to? Because
No,
we find out that he's a skin spy.
Ellie, we do. That's right. The guy who was top dog before Elisaurus, because he was not the top dog. He took over from someone who was.
Which
Oh.
was start with an S, Scaladius or something
Yeah.
like that.
Because that's what we find out right in the opening of the first book, right? In chapter 1, when we first meet Acamian, he finds out from the spy in the Scarlet Spires that their leader just got killed. And not only that, he got killed because they couldn't see the mark on the Sisharim.
Did they tell us how he died?
The Sisharim.
No, I mean, did he set him on fire or something? I'm thinking if he was consult or skin spy, would they have sacrificed themselves to not show that they exist? If I remember correctly, we got an Elisarius POV which talked us through that scene. Maybe we cut off before we could see the skin spy release themselves, but then he's also sufficiently surprised by the skin spice that may not be the case. But yeah, I was trying to think if they were killed in a way that wouldn't reveal the existence of the skin spy, but maybe that's not necessary.
I don't know.
It's the beginning of chapter 23.
In this book,
I mean, I know we know that Elisaurus thinks the skin spies are Sisharim. Like he's convinced that's their thing. So, I mean, I guess you're right. Like it would have had to have been destroyed, right? Because otherwise they would have seen their leader had that face. I don't know. I mean, maybe part of it could also be that maybe he wasn't a skin spy, but was, something else, like a human aligned with the consult, right?
Yeah.
Rather than like, I don't know. This is just a theory.
that makes sense.
Not foolproof, but like, that's been one of the mysteries. Like, why did they start this war when there was peace? I think that would be reasonable. With what we know.
Yeah. Yeah.
So many strands.
I'm excited for the next book. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
We're gonna get a lot. I expect a lot of answers in the final book. A lot of mystery still, particularly around, I imagine, the consult and the non-men and all the Lord of the Rings lore. But I think with the Holy War and the Sisharim and Moingus, we'll get a lot of answers.
Yeah.
I can't help but think not everything is going to be solved, because what the heck is the next 4 books?
Yeah.
I can't help but think that. So there's got to be, not everything's going to get resolved, I suppose, but
For sure.
hopefully a couple of these big ones are gonna come through. And we know that a lot of it takes place in Shima. I think I kind of read the table of contents, and there's a Shima map.
Yeah.
Not to go too far ahead. I don't want to get in trouble.
Last 5 chapters are Shima.
Just want to say really quickly for anybody listening, the synopsis on the I read the synopsis on one of the books in the second half of the series, and it spoiled some things for me. So be very careful.
Yeah.
The synopsis I'm sorry.
Of the book, on the back of the book.
Okay.
Yeah, it does. It's not like major, but I like to be surprised and kind of experience it. So if you're like me and you avoid spoilers at all costs, then just be careful with them.
Okay.
What about there's a very long section of what came before in the next book. Is that?
Yeah, you're okay. Good. You're good to read those. They add in a little bit more, but it's very subtle. So it does evolve as you get through the series, and it adds in more and more detail and things that are relevant to the book you're about to read. So those are good, and they helped me stay on track with all the lore and the story, and then it's neat because you get a little bit more every time, so you get little bits and pieces of information.
Nice. Is there as much battle in the next book, Steve?
I don't remember there being a lot of battles.
Got to at least be at Shime.
There's battles, but it's not as. It's about the same. I don't remember really being bothered by too many battles, so it must not be too much more.
Cool. Yeah. I'm with you. I don't like battle scenes that much, but every chapter that started with the high level overview battle things, I had to plow through it. Like, let's get to the good part.
I felt the same, and there was a few times when I was like, okay, this is building up some tension here, but that would be one of my biggest gripes. Is there are pages where I'm not tuning in too much.
Not that they are badly written or anything. I think they are great. I just battle doesn't interest me.
Like he intentionally throws a lot of like new names at you, and you're like, oh, okay. And it's honestly it's hard to picture a lot of the maneuvers, like short of you describing them very specifically and carefully and non-poetically, and even then oftentimes it takes you, kind of, at least it takes me a bit, I read a lot of history books, and like when they're describing battles, even when they're very blunt about it, it takes a minute to kind of like picture the battlefield and like make sure you kind of have an idea of where everyone is. And that's just made way harder by the fact that then he gets poetic about it, and so it's just kind of like, yeah, okay, I'm just getting the vibes generally, like who's winning, who's losing, what's going on here.
Yeah, I think that was all I looked for at the end of the section, an understanding of who won. The last one, the Padi Raja dies, right? So
yes, he's killed by Krellis.
He's the dude who's ruling in Shime, right? Or who was supposed to be, but some of his heirs ran off.
No,
is he not?
He doesn't rule in Shime. He's just like for the real life equivalent, right? Like the Ayyubid. No, is it the Ayyubid or the Abbasid? Okay, whichever caliphate was in charge in like the First Crusade that ruled over Jerusalem, like they weren't based in Jerusalem. It was just that Jerusalem was like one of the cities they happened to control. And so, they had their capital elsewhere. So he's like based elsewhere, but he is defending Shime because he owns it. It's like one of his cities.
I see. But he's the lord of Shime. Like he's the first person of Shime. Is
I think he's like the very top dog, but I'm pretty sure there's someone else who's like the governor.
Okay.
Like I want to say the term they use is like Sapatisha, I want to say is like in charge of like particular territories within. Um,
Kaskamandri is the Patiraja. I thought he was the top dog.
no, he's the top dog. Like
Okay.
it's like king versus like feudal lord is my understanding, right? And the Patiraja I think is like the king, and the Sapatisha is like the feudal lord. And my understanding is there's a Sapatisha of Shime who maybe died. I don't know. I don't know if that guy's died yet.
Is Moengus the Sapatisha?
Maybe. Yeah, I don't know. What's up with Mathanet? We still don't know. Is Mathanet and Moengus, are they the same person?
No.
I increasingly think probably not, but
I don't know anymore.
I don't know.
I don't think so. But
yeah.
What
Yeah,
are
I
your
don't think
theories?
so. That theory is losing water more and more.
What are your theories now for the last book? I'm curious. I've told you some of mine.
For the last book, the thousandfold thought, we talked about that briefly. Not that there is any remote clue as to what it might be, but it seems like it has something to do with developing a huge following because he decided that he knows or understands the thousandfold thought when people were like basically cheering him and saying, "Oh, I don't know, I imagine long live the warrior prophet." But I assume it has something to do with developing a following. So there's that. I don't
Maybe
know. Hmm.
it's like, because I remember that section too. Maybe it's like when everyone's thoughts sort of become one, like they all fold over into each other, like they're thousandfold. And so it's like when 1,000 are directed by one and they all have the same thought, the thought of their leader. That's just my best guess. Otherwise, I don't know.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. I think that's similar to what I was thinking as well. Um, I wondered, what do you think? Will Esmeralda have her baby in the next book, or will that go over into the next series?
A baby's gonna die. I feel I'm gonna I don't want it, but a baby's gonna die.
A baby.
I don't know if it's
So,
gonna be Moengus. I don't know if it's gonna be Esmanet's baby. Something's gonna happen. A baby will die. This is a Grimdark series. That's the that's the gun on the wall. A baby, something horrible is gonna happen to a baby.
I think
In the next book, the predictions.
in the next book or
A baby will die
the
next book,
next
you think?
series?
Or next series?
Who do we think is gonna die?
Oh, no. Do you think a baby will die in the next book or the next series? What would be?
Oh, the next book. I think one of the two babies will not survive the next book. If they both survive, I will be shocked. Maybe they will. Maybe they will. I would be very pleasantly surprised if both of those babies survive. And of course, if they do, they're going to survive and then grow into like tyrants or something. Like that's what we're dealing with here. So I don't know. I'll be
So
wishing that they died.
I decided I like your theory that Kellus will go become the king of Shime. But who do you think the aspect emperor is going to be? Do you think, I forget his name now, the emperor Ikurai Sirius. He keeps having these dreams that he wants to be aspect emperor. Do you think Confus will be aspect emperor?
No. Not a chance. That dude's gonna try so hard, but he's just gonna fall on his face. Nah. I mean, if I had to guess, I would say Kellis, but who knows? Like, there's a whole other series, so there could be a bunch of new characters. Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
I think it's one of his children.
Oh, good. That's a good guess. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm on board with that.
The Anasurumbur will rise again.
May not this Nasarimber could be. Do we know for certain? We assume it's Kellis, but
we don't know that for certain. Yeah.
I think we're going. I have a theory that this. Okay, not a theory, but the prophecy, I feel like the Mandate schoolmen are too keen to believe that the Anasurimbo returning is going to save the world, or at least Akamian is. All the prophecy says is that an Anasurimbo will return at the end of the world. Nothing
Yep.
about whether they'll cause it, whether they'll save it, whether
Yep.
they'll be involved in it at all, just that they will exist at the
Ding, ding,
time.
ding. We have a winner. I agree 1,000%.
So so I don't know. I feel like all the Akamian trying to teach Kellis things so that he can save the world is going to backfire big time. So that's my theory, I guess, for either the next book or the next series.
I agree.
What else? Mike, some theories. Then we'll ask Steve for quotes.
I don't have a theory, but I'm very curious why Akamian doesn't get in touch with his people. And is that going to happen in the next book? I think it'll be very interesting to see what happens with them. I'm curious because he hasn't really been very forthright with what's going on.
Yeah. I like how the Mandate schoolman got caught in the crossfire of Akamians. I don't care anymore. Rampage.
I kind of like Akamian at the like post torture, just like I don't give a shit anymore. He's been freed.
Yeah, actually, that's a great point. I think it's about time the other Mandate schoolman got involved in this thing, right? Or maybe that's a thing for the next series. I don't know.
It's alluded to quite a lot, and then there's nothing happens.
Yeah.
So
we have to deal with learning about Kellis though. Like I'm with Mike on that. Like that has to come up next book. Kellis he's now like super famous. You know, I suspect that will happen. What do you guys think will happen? So Kamian, we know, survives and writes a history book. Okay, we know at least that much. Who knows exactly, but we know he survives and writes a history book of the Holy War. What do we think happens to Esmenet and Nair? Live, die? What rise, fall, or Proyas and Confis for that matter? Do we think any of them die?
I don't know about die, but I think some of them will become irrelevant for after the next book. Like, yeah.
Nair has doomed to me written all over him.
Yeah, definitely.
I think he dies, if not in the third book, early on in the next series. I don't think he makes it very far. But if I had to choose between the two, I think he dies towards the end of the next book.
Yeah, that's the other big confrontation, right? Nair and I almost said Maithanet. Nair and Moengus. That's the other confrontation that I think that one may be even slightly more intriguing than Kellis and his father.
I agree. I totally agree. I think I also am more interested in that, and I think Nair will confront him, and I don't think he'll be able to bring himself to kill him.
Do you think Moengus will kill him?
I think that is a very real possibility. I think there's a very real chance that either Moengus or Kellis kills Nair, and if I had to bet between the two, I would bet on Moengus.
That makes sense. Yeah.
I mean, that's just so like ripe for like drama, you know, like that it's been driving him, like his demon, and then to go, and then, you know, whatever happens, whether he does end up fighting him or not being able to kill him or what have you. And then Moengus literally kills him. You know, the thing that has been eating him alive is what gets him killed. It's very Greek tragedy, I feel like. That's another theory. All right, there you go. Proyas, I think will live out. I don't know. I'm unsure. Confis, I feel confident will live. Esmenet, I also think will live because they killed Surway, and I don't think Bakker is going to kill the only other significant female character. I don't think he has that in him. uh,
Hmm.
and I suspect she will be in the second series. Proyas, yeah, I don't know. Proyas could go either way.
Yeah, yeah. Speaking of Proes, Akamian and Proes, that conversation they had where Akamian said, I don't care anymore. There are things bigger than you." So yeah, all of these things made like the badass aspect of Akamian. I really was enjoying slash appreciating. Funny he was kinder to Esminette.
It that whole scene frustrated me so much though, because like I totally understood why he was being that way, and like I like Akamian being more active and just like screw it, I'm gonna make things happen, but he was so condescending, and it was like you could influence him so much more if you talk to him. Like I don't think he even realizes how vulnerable Price is emotionally right now.
Hmm.
And if he just like, I feel like if he really reached out, he had a moment there and he totally blew it.
Right.
Yeah.
He's kind of his own worst enemy.
For sure.
I mean, so many of the characters are flawed.
Yes.
You know, it's
I mean,
that's what's
all of
beautiful.
them in
That's
different
what's
ways.
beautiful
Yeah.
about it,
Yeah.
because it's so
Absolutely.
human. I think that Moangus is this other person's name, Malahet, who's the head of the Kisharim. I think that seems kind of obvious though, but we have not that name has not been used since book one from a long time ago. But that's why
Okay.
I think it. That's why I think he is.
The head of the Caesareum. But
Yeah,
if
but
that,
maybe that's too obvious.
I mean, I like that, but also if that were true, he said the dude who met Kellis said there's a subsect within the Caesareum, right? That
Hmm.
um that knows of, that is aware of the logos, and maybe the head has reason to only share those things with a subset, or has Moingus infiltrated the Caesareum in some way.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's the only other name I could find. So maybe you're, yeah.
the I don't come up with theories of my own. I just quash other people.
Yeah. No, it's a yeah. I mean, what you said, Carl, is what I thought from book one. Is that Gillis is priming himself to take over, or I think I said he's going to fight for the other side. I feel like
Mm,
I think that could happen still.
mm.
Yeah, because they're I don't know if I maybe I need to reread the section, but I was not convinced yet. I think there's still factions within the Holy War, but I kept thinking, well, oh, in the next book, um, because the faction there's the Orthodox and the Zadunyani that's been brewing for it to just be quickly over, and now everyone is going to follow Kellis. I don't know. I don't know if that's the case yet. That was what was convenient at the time, I think. But we'll we'll see.
No, there'll still be conflict, I'm sure. It's
Yeah.
not gonna. They're not done. Grasping for power. I mean, Confis is still there, and we know Confis is going to be on his same old shit.
He's a schemer.
But,
Yeah.
yeah, that dude never stops. It's in his blood.
We haven't heard from his people, the emperor, for a while. I guess they're separated, but who knows if he'll show up again, and his dear mother.
And his dear mother. Yeah, their fleet got destroyed by the Padi Raja's ships, right? But he
So
wasn't on the ships, but maybe he'll show up eventually. I feel like he feels more like a sit on my behind and watch from afar kind of person, but we'll see.
For sure.
Um, so quotes, Steve. Many quotes.
I have a couple. I really liked on 514. Lee Noir was fantasizing, I think, about carving his nose the way a child may draw in the mud.
Mm.
I thought that was pretty cool. A couple of the ones we talked about. Sometimes we must cross death to reach our destination. Lie made flesh. That was repeated a few times. One that I liked a lot was on 585, which is emptiness always laughed.
Mm.
What's the
Nice.
context for that?
I forget exactly, but 585.
Okay.
I liked the one when Proyas yelled at the council to listen to Akamian, and there was a passage about how he was always the calm one who never lost his cool in a council meeting, and so it was like children going silent, not because of what their father had done, but because of what they made their father do, something like that.
That's right. Yeah.
That was brilliant. Any others?
All the ones I've written down. I'm sure there's other ones in there, but those are
Yeah.
the ones I wrote down this week.
I had one. It's a short one. For men, no circle is ever closed. We walk ever in spirals.
Hmm.
That's a great one.
That's a
Yeah,
good one.
that stood out to me too.
Cool. So, if that's everything, we are going to meet in 2 weeks to talk about the first 4 chapters of The Thousandfold Thought, which is the third book in the trilogy. Until then, where can people find you? Starting with Steve.
You individually ask, and you just want you can find me on PageChewing.com and join our forums. And if you'd like to join us for these, we have a 2-week break, so it's time to catch up.
Mike.
Yes, I'm also can be found on PageChewing forums, and you can listen to me and Steve discussing our weekly comics. We might also have a brief hiatus as well, but we're having some good discussions there on the
Nice.
other podcast. And I forgot the name, Steve, so it's a little late for me. So
That's okay. Yeah.
I think it's Page Chewing Comics, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
thank you, comics and manga.
Ah, there you go. Okay. And you can find me. Just find me at Page Chewing. You can find me on other social media at Carl D. Albert, but just find me on Page Chewing. And you can find my book, Truth of Crowns, wherever books are sold, hopefully, unless something has gone horribly wrong.
Cool. And you can find me on the PageChewing forum as well, and on my YouTube channel, Reading by the Rainy Mountain. And like Steve said, if you'd like to join us for these discussions, consider checking out the PageChewing forum where we do all the planning. We'll see everyone in a couple of weeks. Enjoy your reading of this book. Until then, bye.